We have to be mindful of as mindful as we possibly can in order to be free, right? Because if we're not being mindful, we're not going to be able to be cognizant of all the different factors we need to be in order to make a clear and free decision. Now, believe it or not, meditation is the training ground for this. And the reason it's the perfect training ground for mindfulness because the object of meditation is to sit without body movement. The mind moves with the body. The more fast the body's moving, the faster the mind moves with it. And you'll notice that because we do, in between our sitting meditation periods, for those of you who come for retreats or during the week, we do a half-hour period of meditation, then walking, and then another half-hour period. The walking consists of a slow walking and a fast walking. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but I've always noticed it, that during the slow walking, it's a lot easier for me to focus the mind and keep it settled. As soon as the fast walking starts, the mind picks up speed. So mind and body are one. Makes sense, right? If mind and body are one, then the faster the body moves, the faster the mind moves to a certain extent. So the process of meditation is a very powerful way to get in touch with this mindfulness quality, with this mindfulness activity, because it's a mirroring effect of nothing. The mirroring effect of nothing, of sitting still, of allowing the body and mind to really settle. And when the body and mind really settles, what pops up is whatever we're not mindful of. It just pops up. We start to become aware of all kinds of things that we're not mindful of. And also, in that same process of becoming mindful, we become mindful of our delusions in many cases. I am this, or I am that. We're usually walking around with a very strong notion of who we are. And along with that notion of who we are is the notion that who we are needs to be defended at all times from those that are waiting out there for us, that are looking for any weakness. In a sense, we still function like people did hundreds of thousands of years ago. During a time when, if you weren't mindful, there were things out there that would eat you. And so you had to be on your guard all the time. And so what?
Another just dance.
Another just dance. They can eat you too if you stand there long enough. Believe me. So we're stuck in these biological bodies that were designed to function in a way that we're not using them much anymore. We still have the bodies of these bipeds, of these beings that were spent hundreds of thousands of years of genetic history being chased by things that could eat us and chasing things that we wanted to eat. So we got our yayas out by running after stuff, right? And by being chased. But what's happened is we're in a kind of lifestyle for the most part now where we aren't dealing with those kinds of stressors, right? We're dealing with psychological stressors in many cases. And the fight or flight syndrome does not work too well in dealing with these things. Fighting, in other words resisting, or fleeing would mean ignoring. Now, mindfulness is the antidote. And the process of mindfulness begins with sitting down and allowing ourselves to be conscious, fully conscious if at all possible. Now, again, are we ever fully conscious? No, obviously. We're human beings. We're never fully conscious. That's what makes it so interesting, though, is we're never fully conscious. If we were fully conscious all the time, we'd get bored of it after a while. We don't want to do it anymore. But since it's an infinite process of becoming more clear and more conscious through this process of mindfulness and of awareness of what actually is instead of what we were deluded into believing is, it's interesting. It's endlessly interesting because if we keep at this practice, we'll keep going deeper, we'll keep becoming more conscious. It's not, of course, just happening when we're sitting. The more advanced, if there is such a thing as an advanced meditator, I don't think there is really, but the more time we spend doing it, the more proficient we get at this experience while meditating, the more it spreads out into our everyday life. And then when we're working and we're doing it, when we're walking, when we're talking, we're eating, every activity we engage in, we're practicing that. What are we practicing? Practicing being mindful. That's all it really is. That simple attention to the present moment. Simple, right? Past doesn't exist, future doesn't exist. Obvious, even scientifically provable, right? Past doesn't exist and future doesn't exist. But where do we spend most of our energy when we're meditating or any other time? Worrying about the past and planning for the future that will never turn out the way we're planning. Our plans will never turn out. Our expectations will never be totally met. So then when our expectations are not totally met all of the time, then what happens? What happens when your expectations aren't totally met? You get disappointed. Okay. What happens when you get disappointed? What?
Spend all the time thinking about that disappointment.
Okay.
Emotions of anger, sadness,
Suffering.
Fear, suffering, right? Why? Are you really though? Why do anger, fear, suffering, self-incrimination, all these things come out of that state of disappointment? What? Okay, we allow it, but why?
habit of shoulda, woulda, coulda.
Yeah, it's habitual, right? When did we start doing this? Long time ago. Long time ago. Who knows how long? Who really knows how long? We think we know, but we really don't usually. So we have this habitual way of dealing with the disappointment of not getting what we think we're entitled to or deserve, right? But ultimately what it gets down to is we're not allowing ourselves to really experience what that is, right? One of the reasons why all the fear and anger and self-incrimination come up is we're not allowing ourselves to really experience in our guts what the disappointment is. What our expectations not being fulfilled feel like. Okay, this is a lack of mindfulness. That's what I'm talking about. Now, I'm talking about mindfulness. It's very easy to think this is something you do with your brain. It is, but it's not. It's something you do with your brain and every other cell in your being. That's body-mind. That's body-mind connection. That's body-mind being one. The Buddhist teaching, Zen teaching, is very clear about body-mind being one. That how often do we experience body-mind as one? No. We're thinking that our brain is separate from the whole rest of our body. The brain is not separate from the rest of the body. It resides within the rest of the body. How could it be separate? You know, when we start out meditating, one of the things we teach is to get your attention down in your lower abdominal area. Allow your breath, right? We did this the other day. Get your attention down low. Why do we do that? Well, physiologically, lower abdominal breathing is a stress-reducing breath. That's true. It just works like that. It has to do with the way our whole system is set up physically. But also, it gets our attention out of this part of our body where we think we live, where we think we are. You know, you ask the average person where you are, and they'll point here to their brain. Is their brain any less who they are than their toe or their stomach? No. Are we able to be that mindful? Are we able to allow ourselves to experience that disappointment? Now, why don't we do it? Why don't we do it? Usually.
Why don't we allow ourselves to experience the disappointment?
Yeah, or anything else like that.
It's uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable, right? It's uncomfortable. Sometimes it can be really uncomfortable, I think. So what does Zen teaching say about if you're experiencing discomfort in a given moment, what do you do